Have you ever wondered how the United States, a powerhouse of global economy, fell into the abyss of the Great Depression? Picture this: the 1920s, a decade of prosperity and exuberance. The United States was humming with the rhythm of the Jazz Age. Times were good. The economy was on an upswing, with the industrial sector booming like never before. The nation basked in the glory of post-war affluence, with the stock market reaching new heights. This era, fondly remembered as the Roaring Twenties, was a time of unprecedented economic growth and widespread optimism. But as the saying goes, what goes up must come down. And come down it did, in the most devastating way possible. As the decade drew to a close, the wave of prosperity began to recede, giving way to an economic catastrophe that would shake the United States to its core. In October of 1929, Wall Street, the heart of American finance, suffered a catastrophic collapse. This was no ordinary downturn. Known as the Wall Street crash, it was the most severe and prolonged financial crisis in the history of the Western industrialized world. The stock market, once a symbol of American prosperity, crumbled. Billions of dollars were wiped out virtually overnight, leaving in its wake a trail of bankruptcies and financial ruin. Investors, once flush with cash, found themselves penniless. Banks, crippled by the crash, began to fail. The domino effect was swift and brutal. The economic devastation spread like wildfire, from the bustling cities to the rural heartlands. Unemployment soared, businesses shuttered, and countless Americans found themselves in the grip of poverty. A sense of despair and hopelessness pervaded the nation. This was no mere recession. This was the Great Depression, a period of severe economic hardship that would last a decade. It was a time of struggle, of hardship, and of profound change. The Roaring Twenties had come to an abrupt end, replaced by an era of economic downturn and social upheaval. And thus, the Great Depression began, plunging the United States into a decade of despair. How severely did the Great Depression impact the American people and their way of life? You may ask. The answer, my friends, is profoundly. This was a period marked not only by economic downfall, but also by immense human suffering, as the American dream was turned into a nightmare for many. In the throes of the Great Depression, unemployment soared. By 1933, about 1 in every 4 workers was jobless. That's roughly 15 million Americans without a paycheck, without a means to support themselves or their families. The job loss led to a homelessness crisis, the likes of which the country had never seen before. Without income to pay rent or mortgages, millions were evicted from their homes. Shanty towns, mockingly called Hoovervilles after President Hoover, sprang up across the country. These makeshift settlements, often built from scavenged materials, were a stark symbol of the desperation of the time. Amidst all this, the American heartland was afflicted by the Dust Bowl. The overfarmed and overgrazed lands of the Great Plains turned to dust, leading to severe dust storms and drought. The once fertile farmlands were rendered barren, exacerbating the food shortages and economic woes. Thousands of families known as Okies were forced to abandon their farms and migrate in search of work and a better life. But the devastation extended far beyond the physical. The psychological impact was immense. The spirit of optimism and prosperity that had defined the Roaring Twenties was replaced by a palpable sense of despair. The American people's faith in the economy, the government, and in themselves was deeply shaken. And yet, amidst the hardship and suffering, there were stories of resilience and hope. People came together, sharing what little they had, forming bonds that would last a lifetime. The Great Depression was a time when the very fabric of American society was tested, and while it was frayed, it did not break. The Great Depression was not just an economic crisis, but a human tragedy that left a deep impact on the American society. It was a time of great hardship, yes, but it was also a time that showed the indomitable spirit of the American people. How did the U.S. government respond to this unprecedented crisis? The initial response came from President Herbert Hoover's administration. Hoover, a proponent of laissez-faire economics, believed in minimal government intervention. He was convinced that the economy would naturally correct itself. But as we know, the situation only worsened. Unemployment soared, businesses collapsed, and the nation's optimism plummeted. Hoover reluctantly introduced measures like the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, aimed to stimulate economic activity by lending to banks and industries, but they were too little, too late. Enter Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man with a different vision. Upon taking office in 1933, Roosevelt attacked the Great Depression with an urgency that was unheard of at the time, introducing what would be known as the New Deal. This was a series of government programs and reforms aimed at boosting the economy and relieving the suffering of the American people. The New Deal was a two-part affair. The first 100 days saw the introduction of the alphabet agencies, like the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, which provided jobs for unemployed young men, and the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, designed to boost agricultural prices by reducing surpluses. The second wave, known as the Second New Deal, included the introduction of the Social Security Act, which provided a safety net for the elderly, the unemployed, and the disabled. The Works Progress Administration, another initiative, created millions of jobs, building infrastructure like roads, bridges, and schools. Roosevelt's New Deal was not without its critics. Some saw it as too radical, an overreach of federal power, while others felt it didn't go far enough. But one thing was clear. The role of the government had fundamentally changed. It had become more directly involved in the economy and people's lives in an effort to ensure stability and protect its citizens from the extremes of boom and bust. The government's response to the Great Depression, particularly the New Deal, redefined the role of the federal government in American life. What finally brought an end to this decade of despair? The answer to that lies in a global event that had profound implications for America and the world at large: World War II. In the late 30s, the world was teetering on the edge of another massive conflict. As nations geared up for war, demand for goods and services skyrocketed. This was the spark that reignited the American economy, dormant for over a decade due to the Great Depression. The United States, initially a neutral player, was supplying arms and ammunition to the Allied powers, which led to a significant boom in the manufacturing sector. This increased demand for labor, and millions of jobless Americans found work in factories producing goods for the war effort. With the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941, America formally entered the war. The economy was put on a war footing, and the government spent vast sums on military production, effectively ending the unemployment crisis. The war also brought about significant social changes. Women, for the first time in American history, began working in factories and shipyards, stepping into roles traditionally held by men. This not only boosted the workforce, but also helped reshape societal norms and gender roles. World War II also led to technological advancements, further stimulating economic growth. Innovations in sectors like aviation, nuclear energy, and synthetic materials fueled by the war would continue to drive the American economy in the post-war era. It's a bitter irony that a conflict as destructive as World War II was the catalyst that brought the United States out of the economic abyss. The war forced a shift in economic policy, from isolationism and protectionism towards international trade and cooperation, setting the stage for America's post-war prosperity. The Great Depression finally ended, not because of domestic policies, but due to the global conflict of World War II. What long-lasting effects did the Great Depression have on the United States? It's a question that resonates deep within the fabric of American history. The Great Depression was more than a mere economic downturn. It was a societal and political earthquake that forever altered the landscape of the nation. In the wake of the economic collapse, American society underwent a profound transformation. The hardship and suffering experienced by so many forced a reevaluation of the American dream. The pursuit of wealth and prosperity was replaced by a focus on survival and solidarity. The importance of community and mutual aid was underscored, as neighbors leaned on each other to weather the storm. This shift in societal values had a lasting impact, fostering a sense of resilience and unity that continues to define the American spirit. Economically, the Great Depression led to a major restructuring of the American financial system. The laissez-faire policies of the 1920s were replaced by a more regulated approach, as the government stepped in to prevent such a catastrophic financial meltdown from happening again. The creation of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the passage of the Glass-Steagall Act laid the foundation for a more stable and regulated financial sector. These measures, aimed at protecting the average American citizen from the reckless speculation and risky investments that led to the crash of 1929, remain an integral part of the American economic landscape. Politically, the Great Depression led to a shift in the role of the federal government. The New Deal policies implemented by Franklin D. Roosevelt expanded the scope of government intervention in the economy, marking a significant departure from previous laissez-faire policies. This shift towards greater government involvement in economic affairs continues to shape American politics and policymaking to this day. The Great Depression was a pivotal moment in American history that shaped the nation in ways that still resonate today. From the ashes of economic despair rose a stronger, more resilient society, a restructured and regulated economy, and a government more involved in the welfare of its citizens. The echoes of this transformative era continue to reverberate, reminding us of our past and shaping our future.